Audrey Lawson stared at the acceptance letter in her email and felt her stomach drop. Not because she didn't want the job, God, she needed this job, but because her boss Richard Sterling had never, not once in 2 years, smiled at her before today. And now he was grinning like he'd won the lottery, waving her into his glass office overlooking Manhattan like they were old friends. Nothing good ever came from bosses who suddenly remembered your name. Hi, welcome to Italian Mafia Stories. Sometimes the people who smile the brightest are hiding the darkest secrets. Lawson, sit, Richard said, sliding a folder across his desk. I've got something special for you. Casino audit in Atlantic City. For weeks. The client specifically asked for someone detail-oriented, and you're the best I've got. He leaned back in his leather chair. Could be a great career move. Show me you can handle this, maybe we can talk about that promotion you've been waiting for. Audrey opened the folder with shaking hands. The Palazzo Nero Casino. Black marble building in the photos, gold trim everywhere, the kind of place that screamed money so loud it felt almost rude. But she wasn't thinking about the building. She was thinking about the $24,000 this job would pay. Her father was dying, stage 4 cancer, experimental treatment that cost $500,000, and insurance wouldn't cover a single cent. $24,000 wasn't enough, but maybe it was a start. Maybe it meant one more month. One more chance. Her mother had died at a slot machine when Audrey was 16. Gambled everything away chasing a win that never came. Audrey became an accountant to understand the math behind it, to see why the house always wins. But sitting in Richard's office, she understood her mother better than she wanted to. When you're desperate, you'll bet on anything. I'll take it, she said. Richard's smile got wider. Excellent. You leave Monday. She didn't ask questions. Didn't research the client. Didn't wonder why a casino needed a junior accountant for a month. She just saw the money, and that was all that mattered. The Palazzo Nero didn't look welcoming. Audrey stood in the parking lot on a rainy Monday morning, staring up at security cameras, 40, maybe 50, all pointed at the entrance like the building was expecting an invasion. Men in dark suits stood by every door, hands folded, faces blank. Not friendly. Not normal. But she'd signed the contract, taken the advance payment, and her father's next treatment was in 3 weeks, so she picked up her suitcase and walked inside. The lobby was beautiful. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, the smell of expensive perfume, but something felt wrong. The staff moved too quickly, eyes down, like they were scared of being noticed. A woman at the front desk checked her in with trembling hands, her name tag crooked. "3rd floor," the woman whispered. "Your office is ready. Just be careful." Careful of what? But the woman had already turned away. Audrey's office was a storage room with boxes stacked to the ceiling. Financial records, all on paper, labeled in angry handwriting. She sat down, opened her laptop, and started building spreadsheets. Week 1 was boring. Normal. Revenue looked fine, payroll seemed right, and nothing jumped out as wrong. Week 2, she noticed the patterns. Facility management services, $3 million every month to a company called Neptune Solutions. But the actual costs, cleaning, repairs, maintenance, were only $200,000. Where was the rest going? Consulting fees to companies that didn't exist. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. Payments to vendors she couldn't find anywhere. The numbers were wrong. Not obviously, not in a way most people would catch, but wrong like a song played slightly off-key. And Audrey always heard the wrong notes. Week 3. She found the encrypted ledgers hidden in a box labeled maintenance records. Small leather books, handwritten in Italian. Her grandmother had been from Sicily, and he taught her the language at Sunday dinners. She was rusty, maybe, but she could read enough. The real numbers. 2 to 3 million every month, flowing out through fake invoices, all going to offshore accounts. This wasn't some dealer skimming tips. This was professional. Sophisticated. Someone with serious financial knowledge was stealing millions. She sat in her tiny office, heart pounding, staring at evidence of massive fraud. She should report it. That was her job, right? Find problems, tell someone, let them fix it. Except that the staff here were terrified. The security was insane. And Richard had been so eager to send her here. Friday of the third week, she called him. Richard Sterling's office. Mr. Sterling, it's Audrey. I found something. Major embezzlement, probably 2 to 3 million monthly through. Stop. His voice went cold. That's not your job. She blinked. Sir, this is serious fraud. We have to report. Your job is tax compliance, Lawson. Review the tax documents, make sure they're clean, and ignore everything else. Are we clear? You want me to ignore embezzlement? I want you to do your job. The client didn't hire us to investigate. They hired us for tax work. Unless you'd rather I send someone else. He paused. Someone who follows instructions? Her father. The treatment. The money she'd already counted on. No, sir. I understand. The line went dead. Audrey sat there, hands shaking, and realized her boss was involved. Richard knew what she'd find. He'd sent her here hoping she was too junior to notice or too scared to say anything. But who could she tell? Richard owned the firm. She was nobody. Just a junior accountant with a dying father and evidence that could probably get her killed. She finished a report that said the taxes looked fine, technically true, and didn't mention the offshore accounts or the millions disappearing every month. She filed her paperwork, collected her check, and flew back to New York thinking maybe she could forget the whole thing. Her apartment door was unlocked. Audrey stood in the hallway, key in hand, staring at the door she knew she'd locked. Every instinct screamed run, but her laptop was inside. Her photos were inside. Everything she owned was inside. She pushed the door open. A man sat on her couch. Expensive suit, broad shoulders, the kind of face that looked like it only smiled when absolutely necessary. He glanced up when she entered, completely calm, like breaking into apartments was just something he did on Tuesdays. Miss Lawson, he said. I'm Vincent. We need to talk. Her hand found her phone. Get out or I'm calling the police. No, you're not. Vincent stood slowly. Because if you do, tomorrow your father will have an accident during his treatment. Room 304, Mercy General. Stage 4 cancer, experimental trial. It would be very unfortunate if something went wrong. He tilted his head. Sit down. Her legs stopped working. She sat. Your boss Richard works for my employers, Vincent said. We sent you to Atlantic City for a reason. We want everything you found on Elio Ferraro. Every transaction, every account, every piece of evidence. All of it. I don't know who that is. Elio Ferraro owns the Palazzo Nero casino. Someone's stealing from him, and we need to know who and how. Vincent pulled out his phone, showed her photos, her apartment building, her father's hospital, the coffee shop where she bought terrible coffee every morning. You have 48 hours. If you don't send us everything, if you run, if you tell anyone, your father's treatment stops. Permanently. He walked to the door, paused. Elio Ferraro is not a good man, Miss Lawson. Give us what we need and maybe you will survive this. The door closed. Audrey sat in her chair, shaking. She thought about the police, but Vincent knew where her father was. She thought about running, but where could she go? She thought about giving them what they wanted, but that felt like signing someone's death warrant. 48 hours to decide whether to betray a stranger or watch her father die. She looked at her locked door, at her father's photo on the shelf, at her laptop full of stolen millions. Richard had set her up. Vincent wanted to use her as a weapon. And Elio Ferraro had no idea his world was about to collapse. Audrey had spent her whole life being careful. Being invisible and safe. But safe wasn't going to work anymore. There was only one option left, really. Only one person who might have answers, who might be as trapped as she was. Tomorrow morning, she was going back to Atlantic City. Not to finish an audit. To meet Elio Ferraro face to face. And pray he didn't kill her the second she walked through his door. Audrey took the first train out of Penn Station at 6 in the morning. She couldn't afford another plane ticket, and spent the entire 2-hour ride staring out the window wondering if she was about to make the stupidest decision of her life. By the time she walked into the Palazzo Nero at 8, her hands were shaking and her coffee had gone cold, but she had no plan except desperation. The same security guards from before watched her cross the lobby, but this time she didn't stop at her office. She went straight to the elevator, pressed the button for the top floor where the executive suites were, and prayed she wouldn't get shot before she could explain. Elio Ferraro's office door was open. He sat behind a massive desk, reviewing security footage on 3 monitors, dressed in a dark suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. He didn't look up when she entered, just kept watching the screens with the kind of focus that made her wonder if he'd been expecting her. "You look terrified," he said quietly, still not looking at her. "Let me guess. The Costas got to you." Audrey froze. "How did you?" "I've been watching you since the day you arrived, Miss Lawson." Now he looked up, and his eyes were dark, calculating but not cruel. "Maybe tired." He gestured to a chair. "Sit down before you fall over." She sat. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, and spread photos across the desk. Her apartment building. Her father's hospital. The coffee shop. Her walking to work. Every single day she'd been in Atlantic City, someone had been following her. "The Costas hired your firm under a fake company name," Elio said. "Belmont Luxury Resorts doesn't exist. Your boss Richard Sterling has been on their payroll for 3 years. They sent you here to find dirt on me, hoping you'd be too junior to realize what you were involved in." He leaned back. "But you found something they didn't expect. You found my embezzler." "I don't understand. If you knew they sent me, why didn't you just kill you?" He almost smiled. "You Americans watch too many movies. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it past the lobby on your first day." He tapped the photos. "I let you work because I have a problem. Someone I trust has been stealing from me for months, maybe years. My men are loyal, but they're not accountants. I've paid 7 different forensic accountants over 2 years, spent millions, and none of them found what you found in 3 weeks. They can't see patterns the way you can." Audrey's mind raced. "So you used me. I gave you access and waited to see what you'd discover. And you found exactly what I needed." Elio slid a contract across the desk. "Now I'm going to make you an offer. $2 million. Find out who's stealing from me. Give me proof. And I'll make sure the Costas never touch you or your father again." "Why would I trust you?" "Because you don't have a choice." He pulled a USB drive from his pocket. "This contains evidence that the Costas hired your firm, that Richard Sterling accepted payment to send you here, and that Vincent threatened your father. If anything happens to you, this uploads automatically to the FBI. It protects you from both sides. The Costas can't kill you without exposing themselves, and I need you alive to finish the job." She stared at the USB. "You're giving me a dead man switch. I'm giving you a reason to stay breathing. Take the deal, find my thief, and you walk away with enough money to save your father and start over somewhere far from here." Elio's expression didn't change. "Or refuse, and I'll let Vincent finish what he started. Your choice." Audrey thought about her father. About Vincent's threat and Richard betraying her. She thought of how she was trapped between 2 sides that both wanted to use her. She looked at Elio Ferraro, this man she'd never met who somehow seemed less dangerous than everyone else in her life right now. "I'll do it," she said. "Good," he answered without looking at her. The first 2 weeks felt like drowning. Audrey moved into a suite at the Palazzo Nero. For her safety, Elio said. She worked 16-hour days rebuilding the casino's financial systems. She tracked every payment, every transfer, every suspicious transaction, building a digital map of where the money was really going. And slowly the picture came together. The embezzler was Luca Bianchi, Elio's cousin. Trusted lieutenant for 15 years. Family. He'd been skimming 2 to 3 million monthly, funneling it through fake vendor companies, using the money to pay gambling debts to the Costas. But that wasn't the worst part. The Costas had been buying up Elio's casino debt for months, piece by piece, planning a hostile takeover. They were going to use Luca's theft as proof of financial instability, force Elio out, and take everything. But Audrey found something else too. The whole empire was bleeding money from outdated systems. Paper records, cash transactions, no digital tracking. Elio was running a billion-dollar operation like it was still 1995. She restructured everything, created legal offshore accounts, modernized the financial tracking, and cut costs by $50 million in the first month. made the operation look legitimate enough that the IRS would leave them alone. Elio started spending more time in her office. At first, he'd just check her progress, ask questions, but then the visits got longer. He'd bring Italian food from his grandmother, homemade pasta, bread that smelled like heaven, and insist she eat because apparently he'd noticed she lived on coffee and protein bars. "You're going to collapse if you don't sleep," he said one night, setting down a container of soup. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You have dark circles under your eyes and your hands shake." He sat across from her. "When's the last time you talked to your father?" "Yesterday. He's doing okay. The treatment is working, I think." She hesitated. "Why do you care?" Elio was quiet for a long moment. "My father tried to leave this life. Wanted to go legitimate, start over, give me a normal childhood. They killed him for it. Drove his car off a bridge and called it an accident." He looked at her. "I understand what it's like to lose someone you do anything to save." Audrey told him about her mother then. About the slot machines, the gambling addiction, how she died chasing a jackpot that never came. How Audrey became an accountant to understand the math, to see the logic behind why the house always wins. "The house doesn't always win," Elio said quietly. "Sometimes the house loses everything." They started talking more after that. Late nights became conversations about their pasts, their families, and the choices that trapped them. He taught her Italian phrases to help her sleep. Conta le stelle, count the stars. She taught him chess strategies because apparently running a casino empire didn't leave time for games. By the third week, Audrey discovered Elio had been paying her father's hospital bills. Anonymously. $50,000 already. She confronted him in his office. "Why?" "Because you're saving my empire, and I take care of the people who help me." He didn't look sorry. "Your father deserves to live. The money means nothing to me. It means everything to me." "I know." He met her eyes. "That's why I did it." She found his charity the same week. A foundation for children of incarcerated parents, scholarships, counseling, support groups. His mother had been imprisoned when he was young for something his father did. He'd built this whole system to help kids like him, and he'd never told anyone. Audrey realized she'd been wrong about him. Elio Ferraro wasn't a monster. He was a man trapped in a monster's world, trying to do good with hands that had been forced into darkness. Week 4, everything exploded. Audrey presented her evidence. Luca was the thief, the Costas were buying the debt, the takeover was imminent. Elio's men handled Luca quietly, but the Costas realized Audrey had betrayed them. She hadn't sent them the information. She'd chosen Elio's side. They sent someone to silence her quietly. Audrey was leaving the casino after midnight when a black car pulled up. She heard Elio shout her name, felt him grab her arm, and then there was a gunshot. Elio stumbled, blood spreading across his shoulder, and his men swarmed from everywhere, dragging them both inside while someone else dealt with the shooter. At the hospital, Audrey refused to leave his side. The bullet had gone through clean, the doctors said. He'd be fine. But she sat in the chair next to his bed, holding his hand, shaking so hard she thought she might break apart. "You could have died," she whispered. "So could you." Elio's voice was rough with pain. "That's not acceptable." "Why did you do that?" "Why would you?" "Because you're the first person in 10 years who sees me as a man, not a weapon." He squeezed her hand. "You look at me and you don't see the empire or the name or the things I've done. You just see me. And I couldn't let them take that away." Audrey leaned forward and kissed him. Soft, careful, terrified, and relieved, and something else she couldn't name. When she pulled back, Elio was smiling. "I'm not good at this," she said. "Neither am I." He touched her face. "But maybe we can figure it out together." 2 days later, Elio called a meeting with his captains. Audrey stood beside him, nervous, but he took her hand in front of everyone. "Audrey Lawson is my chief financial officer and strategist," Elio announced. "She saved this empire. She restructured our entire operation. Anyone who disrespects her answers to me directly." One of the older men, Rocco, crossed his arms. "With respect, boss, she's an outsider. American. How do we know?" She saved us $50 million in 1 month, Elio interrupted. She found the traitor none of you could find. And she's smarter than everyone in this room combined. If you have a problem with that, leave now. Nobody left. And when a rival family tried to negotiate territory the next week, Audrey proved herself. She froze their assets with a lawsuit, tied up their operations with legal paperwork, and made them bleed money without firing a single shot. The rival boss backed down immediately. Rocco looked at Elio after the meeting. She's scarier than any of us. Elio smiled. I know. Audrey Lawson had come to Atlantic City as a desperate junior accountant. Now she stood beside Elio Ferraro, running an empire, holding his hand, and realizing that maybe being trapped had set her free. 2 months passed like a dream Audrey kept waiting to wake up from. She ran the Palazzo Nero's finances alongside Elio, restructuring operations, negotiating deals, learning the language of power that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with strategy. But the FBI was circling closer, and everyone could feel it. The meeting happened on a Tuesday. Representatives from the Mancini family wanted to discuss territory boundaries, and their boss, Angelo Mancini, walked in like he owned the room. Audrey sat beside Elio at the conference table, notepad ready, but Angelo barely glanced at her. Ferraro, Angelo said, sitting down without being invited. Let's talk business. Just us. Send the secretary out. Audrey felt Elio freeze beside her, but before he could speak, she smiled. I'm not a secretary, Mr. Mancini. I'm the chief financial officer. Every deal goes through me. Angelo laughed. You're letting an American girl handle your money? What's next, letting her pick your ties? Actually, Audrey said calmly, opening her laptop, I've been reviewing your operations. Interesting tax situation you have. Multiple properties under shell companies, offshore accounts in Panama, consulting fees to businesses that don't seem to exist. She turned the screen toward him. The IRS would probably love to see these records. I'm sure it's all legitimate, but investigations take time. Could freeze your assets for months, maybe years. Angelo's smile vanished. You're threatening me? I'm informing you. You can negotiate with respect, or I can send this file to 6 different government agencies before you leave this building. She closed the laptop. Your choice. The room went silent. Angelo stared at her, then at Elio, then back at her. Finally he sat back, hands raised. My apologies, Miss Lawson. I didn't realize Ferraro had upgraded his operation. After the meeting, Rocco pulled Elio aside. Boss, she's scarier than any gun we've got. Elio just smiled. I know. But the peace didn't last. 2 weeks later, federal agents showed up asking questions. They didn't have enough to arrest anyone, but they had witnesses, old evidence, and testimonies from former employees. The investigation was building, and everyone knew what would happen if Elio went down. His uncle Salvatore would take over, violent, unstable, the kind of man who solved problems with bloodshed. If Salvatore took control, there'd be war with the Costas. Hundreds would die, maybe thousands, and all the legitimate progress Audrey had built would burn. She spent 3 days locked in her office, reviewing legal precedents, searching for loopholes, anything that could protect what they'd built. And finally, at 2 a.m, she found it. Spousal privilege meant she didn't have to testify against him unless she chose to. And she wouldn't. As for the company, it wasn't that simple. The government could freeze everything. But she had something they couldn't ignore: ownership. Contracts. Salary records. A paper trail proving she'd built half the empire with her own hands. If they wanted to take it all, they'd have to fight her for it. Marriage would protect everything. The business. The people who worked there. The progress toward legitimacy. It was perfect, strategic, and original. She walked into Elio's office the next morning with the plan memorized. He was reviewing security reports, but he looked up when she entered, and something in his expression told her he already knew she'd found something. We should get married, Audrey said, sitting across from him. Legally, it solves the FBI problem. Spousal privilege means I didn't have to testify, and co-ownership protects the assets. It's the smartest move. Elio was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, Is that the only reason? I mean, strategically it makes sense. The timing is right and Audrey. Stop. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the light like a promise. I bought this 3 weeks ago. Her breath almost choked her. You what? I wasn't going to propose because of the FBI. I was going to propose because for the first time in my life, I'm not alone. He stood, walked around the desk, and knelt in front of her chair. You see me. Not the empire, not the name, not the things I've done. Just me. And I love you. So yes, marriage solves our legal problems, but that's not why I want to marry you. I want to marry you because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Audrey felt tears on her face. I see you. And I love you too. So yes, I'll marry you. The wedding happened 2 weeks later. Small and private, just Elio's grandmother Alessia and Audrey's father, who'd flown in from New York looking healthier than he had in months. The experimental treatment was working. He was in remission. He walked her down the aisle in the Palazzo Nero's private chapel, crying the whole time. Elio stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored suit, and when Audrey reached him, he took her hands. His vows were in English. His second language, the one that didn't come easily, and that made them mean even more. You deserve to hear this in your words, not mine, he said quietly. I promise to see you every day the way I see you now. I promise to protect what we've built together. I promise to love you even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when the whole world tells us we shouldn't. His voice cracked slightly. You gave me a reason to be better. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that. Audrey's vows were simpler. You gave me a life worth living, not just surviving. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I promise to stand beside you always. In the light and in the shadows. Because we're better together than we ever were apart. Alessia cried through the entire ceremony. Afterward, she pulled Audrey aside and gripped her hands tight. Finally, a woman with a spine. You'll keep him honest and more human. She kissed Audrey's cheeks. Welcome to the family, granddaughter. The FBI closed their investigation 6 weeks later. They had insufficient evidence. The empire was technically legal now, all the illegal parts historical and unprovable. Audrey had restructured everything so carefully that even with witnesses, they couldn't build a case that would hold up in court. The Costas got their peace deal. 2 casino properties Elio didn't need anymore in exchange for a truce. Audrey negotiated it as a business merger, saved everyone's pride, and made it look like cooperation instead of surrender. The Costas walked away realizing she was more dangerous with a laptop than most people were with weapons. 6 months after the wedding, Audrey stood on the penthouse balcony overlooking Atlantic City. The sun was setting, painting the ocean gold and orange, and she had one hand on her small but growing belly. Her father was healthy, living in a condo Elio had bought him near the beach. The Palazzo Nero was thriving, legitimately, with clean books and happy employees. Everything she'd fought for had come true. Elio came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? How different everything is from 6 months ago. How scared I was. How lost. She turned in his arms. You saved me. No, Elio said softly. We saved each other. You gave me a reason to leave the darkness. I gave you a reason to stop hiding. That's not saving. That's just loving someone enough to fight for them. Boy or girl? Audrey asked, smiling. Doesn't matter. As long as they never have to choose between right and survival. As long as they know they're loved. He kissed her forehead. We'll make sure of it. Audrey looked out at the city they ran together now, legitimately, carefully, with purpose instead of fear. Her wedding ring caught the sunset light. In her pocket was a letter from her father saying he was cancer-free. On her desk downstairs were contracts for 3 new business ventures, all legal, all profitable. And in her heart was something she hadn't felt in years. Real hope. The kind that didn't come from desperation or luck, but from building something good with someone who loved you enough to change. She'd come to Atlantic City as a desperate accountant trying to save her father. She'd found betrayal, danger, impossible choices. But she'd also found Elio. Found herself. Found a future worth fighting for. And as the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean, Audrey Lawson Ferraro smiled, because for the first time in her entire life, she wasn't just surviving. She was home. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe for more emotional mafia romance stories, and drop a comment telling me what you loved most about Audrey and Elio's journey. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you more stories that make you believe in love, redemption, and second chances.